Thank you. Thanks very much. Wow, thank you. Thank you for your warm welcome. What a crowd, what a turnout tonight. You know, recently I was introduced on the stage in New York as the man who'd made $100 million in real estate in Australia. And I got up on stage and I also said, thank you very much. It was very humbling. But I added, I feel I ought to set the record straight. You know, recently I was introduced on the stage in New York as the man who'd made Firstly, when you're in New York, it may seem as though Australia and New Zealand are connected by the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but they're really separate countries. It wasn't Australia, it was down in New Zealand. And secondly, if the truth be known, it wasn't in real estate, it was actually in the oil industry. And thirdly, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't 100 million, it was only 10 million. And anyway, it wasn't me, it was my brother. And he didn't make 10 million, he lost 10 million. But apart from that, you've got the right person. You see, the whole point is things are never what they seem. We think we know the way something works or the way it's put together, but very often we are flat wrong. My belief is that real estate is not just a little bit better than other investments or even a lot better than other investments. It's hundreds and thousands of times better. But to convince you of that, you're going to have to change some of your paradigms. Remember what I said, things are never what they seem. One of my favorite statements goes like this. I know it's a bit provocative, but... And there it is. Woman without her man is helpless. And I put that up there for a specific reason. The point is that things are never what they seem. If I ask you, what do McDonald's do? You all know that they make hamburgers, right? And it's true, they do make hamburgers. But making hamburgers is incidental to McDonald's operations. What McDonald's do is very clever. They go around the world and always buy up pieces of land on the left-hand side of the road leaving town for those countries that drive on the left, and on the right-hand side of the road leaving town for those countries that drive on the right. The reason why they do that is when you're driving home from work after a hard day at the office and you suddenly remember you haven't bought any groceries, what on earth are you going to do for dinner? You can see the McDonald's sign and say, oh, I'll just pull off the road and buy takeaways rather than having to cross the peak hour traffic. So they buy pieces of land on that side of the road, they pull down whatever's there, they put up a fancy glass structure, slap the big yellow M on it, and then they do three very clever things. Firstly, it's true that they sign up their franchisees for a high upfront fee. That's smart on McDonald's part. And secondly, it's true they have a contract such that every hamburger sold results in a commission coming back to McDonald's. Also very smart. But thirdly, and most importantly, McDonald's signs its tenants up on long-term leases. McDonald's owns just about every property that they operate out of. McDonald's is the world's biggest and swishest real estate company. You've all had a chance to read this. Could I have a show of hands, please? How many of you agree with the statement? And you're brave enough to admit it. All right, well, you came without your spouse, and you arrived on your own. All right, thank you. How many of you disagree with it? Oh, folks, we've got a turnout that is hopeless. We've got to backtrack here for a moment. What is the opposite of love? Hate, you all say. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. It's where you're indifferent about something. The worst thing you can ever be called is a nice person, because the word nice is an acronym for nothing inside me cares enough about you to have an opinion. You're nice. I'm telling you, if you want to be successful as a real estate investor or as anything else, you can't be indifferent. You've got to have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, how will you make a decision? If you don't have an opinion as to whether it's a good deal, you'll never buy it. You're allowed to have an opinion. Doesn't matter if your opinion clashes with that of the person sitting next to you. Have an opinion. Be willing to make mistakes. The people who never make mistakes never learn. Those who make mistakes often learn very fast. So having said all of that, could I please have a show of hands? How many agree with this statement? A woman without a man is helpless. Thank you. That's quite a good turnout. And now, how many disagree with it? All right, thank you. That's most of you. Well, that's very interesting to see. What I want to do now is take this pen again and just put a couple of marks on this paper. I'm going to put a comma down here. And I'm going to put a colon here, actually. And how about a comma here? get it yet, ask someone discreetly in the break. Can you see how by adding 3 little marks to this piece of paper, we have completely changed the meaning of it? How many of you now agree with this statement? Oh, look at that. Have I redeemed myself, madam? Thank you. And how many now disagree with it? Oh, some of you. Okay, interesting. The point I'm making here is we had a statement about which most of you had an opinion, and then by putting 3 little dots on the paper, we suddenly completely changed the meaning of that sentence. And life can be like that. Things are never what they seem. Sometimes by changing a little aspect, your paradigms are shifted. But what I want to do tonight is show you by adding 3 metaphorical little dots to your perception about real estate, suddenly we might change it from being a lousy investment to being, wow, I never realized it was that good. That's pretty hot. Who would like to go on that journey? Okay, let's do it. I came from a family that prized education. Their belief system was to do well in life, you need to study hard, because by studying hard you can get qualifications and a degree. And with a degree you can get a good job, and with a good job you can build a career, and with a career you can have financial security. Was that bad advice on the part of my parents? Well, it wasn't for them, right? They did to the best of their abilities. They tried to give us the tools we needed. It's the sort of education that they would have wanted to have. So from their perspective, it was great advice. So it was without much thinking that I went off to university. Didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't like the sight of blood, still don't really. That was medicine out. The thought of peering into people's mouths all day, I mean, yuck. That's dentistry out. I wanted to do law, but then you have to practice in the country in which you study, so I eliminated that. I went through this process of elimination and ended up doing engineering. However, during my first week at engineering school, I looked around me at these academics who were supposed to have made it. And they wore shabby clothes and drove around in old clunkers and lived in very modest homes. And I thought there's something wrong with my picture that academics have financial security. So I took it upon myself at the tender age of 17 to make a study of the rich. I wanted to know what is it that the rich have in common. Because I thought if I could identify 30 or 40 things that they have in common, and if furthermore I could emulate those things, then my chances of becoming fabulously wealthy surely would go up. Would you agree? Good theory. It didn't work though. Because at the end of this 9-month study, I concluded that the rich had very little in common. It wasn't age or gender or whether you were born into a rich family or not, or whether you're an immigrant family, whether you're the firstborn, the lastborn. It had nothing to do with any of those things. I could only find 2 things that the rich had in common. The first is that almost without exception, the rich had integrity. In other words, their word was their honor. If they said they were going to do something, they did it. Now here's a secret I learned about integrity long after my 9-month study at the age of 17. Integrity is not genetic. Do you hear what I'm saying? If you don't like the level of integrity that you've got, you can change it in a heartbeat. Just make the commitment to be more true to your word. And I'm telling you, your financial future will change. The second thing that the rich had in common, almost without exception, is that they either made their money or they held their wealth in property. In other words, the Hughes Corporation, they made their money because they had a patent on a diamond-tipped drilling bit. That's how they made their billions of dollars. But they didn't just hold it in stocks of diamond-tipped drilling bits. They bought real estate with it. So the rich either made their money or held their wealth in real estate. That's why I decided at 17, that's what I want to get into. Now, it wasn't easy as a 17-year-old kid going to a bank and asking for a mortgage. If you think I look young now, you should have seen me then. They thought I was 12. The first bank manager thought it was a prank. If you think that's tough, imagine what it was like for me as a 17-year-old kid asking a 17-year-old girl out on a date, and she too would think I was 12. Now, you may well laugh. I got to date the 17-year-olds for years afterwards. Just kidding. But anyway, it was tough getting my first mortgage. But I succeeded. I got my first property. And then as time went on, I bought more and more properties. It took 4 years to get an honors bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, not the easiest course around. They came to me and said, you know, it's only 1 more year for a master's. Why don't you do it? And I couldn't think of an answer, so I did it. And then I switched to PhD, and I ended up spending 8 years at university. They say there are 3 kinds of students: part-time, full-time, and eternal. I was the eternal variety. But at the end of those 8 years, I popped out with a little piece of paper that said PhD. Now think of my parents. Remember the ones with the philosophy that you have to study hard to do well. Do you think they were proud of their son? Oh, can you imagine? They were sitting by the telephone waiting for me to phone them to announce the acceptance of a job. And I had a couple of interviews. I remember going to one interview where they seemed impressed. They said, well, we want to take you on. We'll offer you a salary of $32,000. Now, before you scoff at that, back then, $32,000 was a handsome salary. And it would have been tempting. However, unfortunately for my prospective employer, I'd just completed a real estate deal that netted me $35,000. And I remember thinking to myself, why would anyone in their right mind work for 40 hours a week for 50 weeks of the year, turning up every morning at 8 or 9 o'clock saying, hi boss, here I am, what would you like me to do today, for $32,000 lousy, when in 1 week you can make 35 and get the rest of the year off. So I never accepted that job, and to this day I have never had a job. You see, we're stuck in this trap thinking that we need to do what's not successful for us because there's no alternative. And I want to show you that there is an alternative. Now, I was cajoled into writing a book. This first book here came out, Making Money in Residential Real Estate, co-authored with an Australian. It came out 10 years ago this year, and it's significant because in this book we describe a 10-year plan where if you buy 1 property a year for 10 years, you can end up with an equity of $1 million. Of course, I said an equity of $1 million doesn't mean much, but anyway. So we came up with this book. It's just a very easy read, 76 pages. People have achieved this $1 million of equity long before their 10 years was up, simply by buying more than 1 property a year. I was cajoled into sharing more details about what I do and how I do it. And eventually I thought, well, this is all very good and well, but I better check my audiences to see whether anyone's taking the information on board and earning $1 million or $2 for themselves. Fair enough? And to my absolute horror, the percentage of people just like yourselves who would actually apply the knowledge I was giving them and go out there and make $1 million was very small, about 5%. And I was devastated. I thought, gee, am I not speaking clearly enough? Am I speaking too fast or too slow? It bugged me. So I embarked on my second big study. The first one wasn't the PhD, remember, it was what makes the rich rich. And the second study was, why is it that when you give people money or give them ideas, they don't act on it? Well, this study took a lot longer. This was an 11-month study. It really bugged me. I was racking my brain. I was doing all my research. And I came up with the answer. And the answer is embedded in a program I run, which takes a long time, way longer than we've got time for tonight. However, I can do an exercise in 3 minutes flat, which gets the same information as it would if we spent 2 days doing this. So I want your permission to go through this exercise. Before I ask you whether you agree or not, I warn you that it involves something that you all think you like, but deep down you may despise. It involves cold, hard cash. Having said that, who would like to go through the 3-minute exercise? Right, most of you good. I always believe that carrying money around on one's person is a very good idea. I think you should always have a lot of money, US dollars, if you travel around a bit, Australian dollars. Could you confirm that this is a real Australian dollar note? We're not talking monopoly money or anything like that. I'm going to do an exercise here. If you've seen this or heard of it, please sit back, relax, enjoy the show, get another level of learning out of it. I'm going to say something, and I want you all to act on what I say. I have here a $100 note from the Reserve Bank of Australia. Who will give me $50 for it? You sure? Is this a real note? Seems to be, all right. What's your first name? David. Congratulations, David. Let's give him a big hand. So, David gave me a $50 note. I gave him $100. Is it fair to say that David just made $50? Let's give him another round of applause. Well done. So similarly, is it fair lost $50. So you're a fool. But do it again, I'll never act different this time. Did I lose $50 though? There are over 800 people in this room. Could it be that I'm willing to invest $50 in a room of 800 people, it's just cents per person, so that you can learn in 3 minutes flat, remember, what otherwise would have taken me a whole weekend? Is my time worth more than $50 for a weekend? You'd better believe it. Who couldn't have done the deal because you didn't have $50 on your person? Raise your hands up high, please, and look around you, not at the people, but at the number of hands up in the air. So thank you for being honest, but for whoever said, well, I don't need money because, you know, what would I need it for? Here is a prime example. You can do great deals, and real estate is like that, as we'll find out in a minute. Where's the plastic brigade? When I said, who will give me $50 for it, did I say in cash? Would I have accepted a credit card? Did anyone ask me? Would I have accepted an IOU? Absolutely, just to teach the rest of you a lesson. Can you buy real estate with an IOU? Of course you can, it's called a mortgage. It's not funny, it's true. Alright, why else didn't you come up? Tell me. Too good to be true. Who thought it was too good to be true? Well, thank you very much. After I go to all this effort to talk about integrity, you think I'd go up there and say, who would give me $50 for this? And just as you come up, I say, nah, 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 nah. Thank you very much for your faith and confidence. Just because a deal sounds too good to be true doesn't mean to say that it is. It may be. Check it out. But if you don't check out deals that sound great, by definition you will be limiting yourself to those deals that are so lousy, those deals where the returns are so low, they're bound to be real. And I hope you will realize that this exercise has absolutely nothing to do with the lousy $50 inside this room tonight. It has everything to do with $50, $50,000, $5 million, $50 million outside of this room, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Because in all probability, the way you react to this exercise is the way you react to real deals in real life. I don't have the money. I don't need it anyway. It's probably a prank. Sounds too good to be true. They wouldn't take an IOU. Not even worth asking. Oh, someone else has got the deal. Look, there's someone fluffing around with it, wherever it is. I want you to think about that. What's holding you back? What stops you from going out there and doing those deals? And it all has to do with belief systems. This is what my study showed me. That we're all brought up believing certain things. You go to one of your parents and say, hey, Mom or Dad, I want a bicycle. And they say, well, what do you think, kiddo? That money grows on trees. We've all heard that, right? Or we're told money is the root of all evil. Right? And in fact, the actual saying was for the love of money is the root of all evil. But we all think money is associated with being evil. We're told that in order to make money, you must have money. Right, that's my excuse. I don't have any money. I can't make any. I'm poor. I was born this way. I'll probably die this way. So don't give me a hard time about it. The more you say that, the more it becomes a part of you. Even when we describe the rich, do we call them squeaky clean rich? No, we talk about them as the filthy rich. They are so rich, they are stinking rich. We associate being wealthy with filth and stench. So one exercise you may want to do, most of you won't, is tomorrow morning go to the bank and withdraw $1,000. Those of you that don't have $1,000 in the bank, you've got a problem. Withdraw $1,000 and carry it around on your person for an entire month. Because assuming that you won't be mugged, and I'm not guaranteeing that you won't, so don't blame me if you are. Assuming you're not mugged, assuming it's not stolen, assuming you don't lose it, and assuming you don't spend it frivolously, at the end of that month you will still have that $1,000 in your pocket. And you'll say, wow, you know what? I've overcome all those fears. I'm in control of this money. And something will happen inside of you. Suddenly you will be in control of this thing that you've been frightened of. If you couple that with coming up with some new belief systems instead of money's the root of all evil, or only my rich neighbors can afford stuff because they're doing illegal things, say, hey, money comes to me easily. Or become more evangelical about it. I am a magnet for money. Anything. And say that out loud if you think your spouse will not kick you out for saying it every morning and every evening. And say it when you get up and when you go to sleep. And do that for a month and carry your $1,000 around on your person. Your lives will change. Give it a go. What have you got to lose? You guys are so pragmatic, you know. Maybe I should say, what have you got to gain? Everything, exactly. So give it a go. All right, I want to talk about real estate because that's my passion. I love real estate. As I said, I don't think it's a little bit better or a lot better. I think it's orders of magnitude better. So the book I wrote most recently is called Real Estate Riches, and if you don't mind, could I have a show of hands how many have read this book? Okay, that's a good turn. Thank you very much. It's also good to know we're still with new clients out there. That's fabulous. But I want to summarize 4 questions I posed in this book because they're at the core level of what I believe in. Let's imagine we want to compare investing in real estate with investing in other things. Now, other things for most Australians means the stock market, the share market. You can also invest in mutual funds or unit trusts, or it's still shares. Mostly Australians invest in shares. I want to compare real estate with shares. Imagine also we have a lump of money. It'll be hard for some of you to imagine you have no money, but anyway, you will have by the time you invoke some of the things we're learning here. Imagine you've got $100,000 in cash. Could be more, could be less, doesn't matter. I'm going to ask 4 questions. First question goes as follows. You're going to use your $100,000 cash to invest in shares. How many dollars worth of shares can you buy with $100,000 cash? 100,000, right? I know some will say, but hang on, you can buy shares on margin. And that's true for a small number of investors, for a small number of shares, usually a small percentage of what's on the market, and then only for about 30% of the value. And if the shares go down a little bit, they have what's called a margin call. For most Australians, when you invest $100,000 in the share market, you have to put up $100,000 cash. Let's compare that with real estate. You have that same $100,000 cash. You want to buy real estate. How many dollars worth of real estate can you buy with $100,000?